Good to have you back for another edition of your weekly program, African Union Journal on Africa 24. The African Union Journal brings to you updates on the actions of the African Union. For the first time, Africa hosted the Global Conference on the Elimination of Child Labor. The 5th edition of this conference was held in the city of Durban in South Africa. The objective of this event was to raise awareness on child labor and accelerate progress towards its elimination. From May 15 to 20, 2022, several voices were raised to denounce the significant number of children who are forced to work instead of going to school. Details in this report.
Inside the Durban International Convention Center in KwaZulu-Natal, children sing the South African National Anthem and the African Union Anthem to mark the start of the 5th edition of the Global Conference on the Elimination of Child Labor. It is the first time that the event is held in Africa and that it sees the participation of children.
We are very happy and would like to applaud the government of South Africa for giving us this platform to express our views, not only to express but to present solutions to the issues we as children face. This shows that as a country,
the conference took place from the 15th to the 20th of May 2022 and was attended by several prominent figures from Africa and around the world. Throughout the week, panel discussions were held to accelerate actions to end child labor.
It is estimated that in Africa, 40% of the children aged between 5 and 14 years are engaged in regular economic activities. The Southern African Development Community has not been spared to increasing child labor problem. The most challenging issue within SADC region is that most of the countries have not yet adopted innovative national strategies to combat child labor.
Cyril Ramaphosa, South Africa's president, called on all participants to adopt the Durban Call to Action, the document that outlines practical steps to make a difference for children. The document was released at the end of the conference.
In reflecting on the paramount importance we have attached to the rights of all children of our country, we recall Nelson Mandela's words when he said, "Our children are the rock on which our future will be built, our greatest asset as a nation. They will be the leaders of our country, the creators of our national wealth, who care for and protect our people."
According to the International Labour Organization, more than 160 million children are working today instead of going to school, for example. Half of these children are between the ages of 5 and 11. In South Africa, under the Basic Conditions of Employment Act, it is a criminal offence to employ a child under the age of 15. Children under the age of 15 can work in performing arts industry with a permit from the Department of Labour.
Africa has the highest number of working children. According to the International Labour Organization, 41% of children on the continent are economically active, a situation caused by poverty, limited access to basic social services, natural disasters, poor governance, among others. In order to effectively combat child labor, the African Union intends to strengthen social protection, access to education, and vocational training. More in this report. In Africa, child labor is a major factor that hinders social development. In Rwanda, for example, there are an estimated 400,000 economically active children, while in Zimbabwe, this figure stands at about 5 million children aged 5 to 17. In its Agenda 2040, the African Union prioritizes the eradication of this phenomenon.
The African Union has many instruments. We have the Charter on Human and People's Rights, the Charter on the Rights and Welfare of Children. We also have the committee that works on children's issue and our strategy and its 10-year action plan. Text exists at the national, regional, and continental levels. We must harmonize these texts without appropriating them, inserting them into the national domain to enable us to fight against the worst forms of child labor.
Africa has the highest number of economically active children. According to the International Labour Organization, 41% of children on the continent, or more than 92 million, work, and an average of more than 30% of children between the ages of 10 and 14 are agricultural workers. Data from the institution show that sub-Saharan Africa has more than 48 million economically active children.
The inclusive development of agriculture and rural development, as well as the equitable sharing of natural resources, are essential to address the problem of child labor in Africa. My department will continue to support these key issues across the continent because eradicating child labor, especially in the domain of agriculture, is more urgent than ever to achieve a prosperous Africa.
On the continent, about 120,000 children under the age of 18 are child soldiers or sex slaves. Several factors explain the persistence of child labor in Africa. The African Union indicates in particular the death of parents, extreme poverty, and poor governance. The COVID-19 crisis and socioeconomic difficulties have reportedly increased these figures in recent months.
Nous sommes engagés à tout mettre en place afin d'augmenter l'accès à l'éducation, à l'enseignement de qualité et aux technologies. Mon département va en effet travailler avec le secteur privé pour la transformation du domaine de l'innovation. L'Union africaine va participer à l'élimination du travail des enfants et va prioriser les actions suivantes. Réduire le nombre des enfants qui ne sont pas scolarisés à travers des bourses et des programmes alternatifs d'acquisition de compétences, d'apprentissage et encourager la mise en place des programmes d'alimentation scolaire pour combattre la malnutrition et promouvoir l'apprentissage de qualité.
In recent years, the African Union has been committed to promoting education and respect for the rights of children. The institution intends to improve access to education, social protection, the sharing of experience, and to strengthen the mobilization of social actors, as well as capacities in terms of vocational training, in a bid to put an end to child labor. The African Union Commissioner for Education, Science and Technology and Innovation, Professor Mohamed Bellossine, paid a working visit to Cameroon from May 10 to 14, 2022. During his visit, Mohamed Bellossine met with several Cameroonian authorities in order to assess the progress of the construction works of the Rectorate of the Pan-African University and to evaluate the cooperation between the Pan-African University and the Republic of Cameroon. Let's follow this report.
On a working visit to Cameroon on May 13, 2022, the Commissioner of the African Union in charge of Education, Science and Technology and Innovation, Professor Mohamed Bellossine, visited the site of the future seat of the Rectorate of the Pan-African University under construction in Yaoundé. This building is built on the initiative of President Paul Biya in accordance with the clauses inherent in the headquarters agreement signed in Yaoundé on April 5, 2018 between the African Union and the Ministry of External Relations of Cameroon. The cost of the project is estimated at more than 833 billion francs CFA.
Je suis venu au Cameroun pour faire le point un petit peu sur l'état de fonctionnement et l'état d'avancement de tous les projets concernant l'université panafricaine. Et comme vous le savez, l'université panafricaine, le siège de l'université panafricaine, c'est-à-dire le rectorat de l'université panafricaine, est hébergé ici au Cameroun, à Yaoundé. Et cet endroit où nous nous trouvons maintenant avait déjà été sélectionné pour abriter le futur siège donc du rectorat, et nous sommes venus avec monsieur le ministre d'État visiter le chantier qui est très actif comme vous le voyez.
Established in 2012 on the initiative of the heads of state and government members of the African Union, the Pan-African University is a continental university network made up of 5 institutes spread over 5 African sub-regions, whose mission will be to provide quality postgraduate education geared towards the achievement of a prosperous, integrated, and peaceful Africa, to assess the functioning of the governance and regional integration component based in Yaoundé. Professor Mohamed Bello had a working session with officials from the Pan-African University, students and officials from the University of Yaoundé too, host of the Pan-African University Institute of Governance, Humanities and Social Science.
Nous continuerons à œuvrer en tant que commission en faveur d'une économie pacifique et dynamique et donner des opportunités à chaque enfant africain afin qu'à la fin de ses études, il trouve un endroit où travailler, vivre et se maintenir.
The courtesy visit paid to the minister delegate to the Minister of External Relations in charge of cooperation with the Commonwealth, Félix Bayou, made it possible to take stock of the cooperation between Cameroon and the Pan-African University for the construction of a stronger and more prosperous Africa.
Cette intégration des jeunes qui vont étudier ensemble pendant plusieurs années permet véritablement de renforcer l'idée d'appartenance à un continent commun, permet de renforcer aussi les idées de paix, permet de renforcer les idées d'intégration du continent.
In 10 years, the Pan-African University has already trained more than 1,500 masters and more than 400 doctoral students from 50 African countries, a fact that reflects the Pan-African dimension of the institution.
And on to a news in brief. For this edition of the African Union Journal, Nados Bekele Thomas has been appointed head of the African Union Development Agency NEPAD.
Nados Bekele Thomas becomes the first woman to head the African Union's Development Agency. Her appointment was approved by the head of states and governments at the 35th Ordinary Session of the African Union Summit in February 2022. Former United Nations Chief and Resident Coordinator in South Africa, Nados Bekele Thomas succeeds Dr. Ibrahim Hassani Mayaki as AUDA NEPAD's President and CEO.
And the African Union has deployed a pre-election assessment mission to Kenya in view of the presidential election slated for August 9, 2022.
Following an invitation from the government of the Republic of Kenya to the African Union to observe the upcoming general election scheduled for August 9, 2022, an African Union pre-election assessment mission visited Kenya from May 16 to 20, 2022. This was to assess the state of preparation for the August 9, 2022 general election and the general context in which the election will be held. The mission also engaged in consultations and dialogue with the key political and electoral stakeholders in Kenya to promote peaceful, credible, and inclusive elections.
And then the Republic of Cameroon assumes the presidency of the Peace and Security Council of the African Union.
The Republic of Cameroon is chairing the Peace and Security Council for the African Union, the permanent decision-making body for the Pan-African Institution for Conflict Prevention, Management and Resolution this month of May 2022. The seventh since the creation of the Council in 2004. Cameroon's presidency is part of the extraordinary summit of the African Union to be held on May 28, 2022, devoted to the challenges of governance and security on the continent, namely on constitutional change of government, humanitarian crisis and terrorism.
In view of the realization of the African Union's Agenda 2063, a high-level meeting on the financing of the Pan-African Organization will be held from the 13th to the 14th of June 2022. It will be held under the theme Beyond the COVID-19 Pandemic and the Conflict in Ukraine, Building Resilience in African Economies and Financial Sustainability of the African Union. This meeting represents a concerted effort by member states to ensure that the African Union is funded in a sustainable, predictable, and accountable manner. The African Coalition for Global Action Against Poverty will celebrate the 32nd edition of the World Day of the African Child on the 16th of June 2022. The objective of this day is to advocate with African states and governments to limit the use of children for begging and the eradication of forced labor, human trafficking, and modern child slavery. The member states of the African Union will celebrate the International African Women's Day on the 31st of July 2022. This day aims to affirm the role of women's organizations for the political freedom of Africa and to promote the economic and social status of women on the continent. This Pan-African Women's Day will be celebrated and observed in all African Union member states' capitals with national programs and various activities. The Extraordinary Summit of African Head of State on Industrialization and Economic Diversification of Africa will be held from the 20th to the 25th of November 2022 in Niamey, Niger. According to the African Union, the summit aims to underline Africa's renewed determination and commitment to industrialization as one of the central pillars for achieving the continent's economic growth and development objectives.
Bankole Adeoye is the African Union Commissioner for Political Affairs, Peace and Security. He was elected to this position in February 2021. As the continent is faced with major socioeconomic and security challenges, the African Union is committed to fighting terrorism and insecurity. Ambassador Bankole Adeoye is leading the actions of the African Union in this fight. More about Bankole Adeoye in this report.
The Nigerian Bankole Adeoye is the African Union's Commissioner for Political Affairs, Peace and Security, elected to this position in February 2021 at the 34th African Union Summit. He replaced the Algerian Shmal Sheghi, who held this position for 2 consecutive terms. He is responsible for leading the development and implementation of policies, programs and strategies on political affairs, peace and security in line with the aspirations of the African Union's Agenda 2063.
The African Union Political Affairs, Peace and Security is a very strategic portfolio. As we all know, it is at the heart of Agenda 2063. It is the heartbeat of our continent when it comes to the future of our youth, of our women, of our elderly, of all, and of course also how we engage our partners, how we engage the international community. It is a very, very strategic position.
The Ambassador Bankole Adeoye is the first African Union Commissioner to combine the peace and security portfolio with the political affairs portfolio merged by the new reform. The 66-year-old commissioner has more than 30 years of experience in foreign policy and diplomatic practice. He leads the action of the African Union in the fight against terrorism in African countries and unconstitutional changes, taking strict measures against the states concerned.
Whatever trend we are witnessing in our member states, we are monitoring closely because we have regional analysts that suspend member states and hold them accountable for failures in democratic governance. Any coup or attempted coup will be roundly condemned by the African Union without exception.
Before joining the African Union, Bankole Adeoye served as Nigeria's permanent representative to the African Union and the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, and ambassador to Ethiopia with concurrent accreditation to Djibouti from 2017 to 2020. According to him, diplomatic prevention should be encouraged as a means of peacekeeping.
Over the years, we have invested so much in responding to conflicts without investing our tools, our energy, our time in conflict prevention. I believe that will be the African Union, the world will be a better place for us if we promote preventive diplomacy as was championed by one of Africa's greatest sons in the past, Dr. Boutros Ghali, who also became UN Secretary General. He spoke about the emphasis on preventive diplomacy.
With a bachelor's degree in political science and history and a master's degree in political science obtained in 1982 and 1987 respectively, the Ambassador Bankole Adeoye dedicated his career to creating synergies for good governance, peace, security, and sustainable development.
Thank you for watching the African Union Journal. Stay tuned for more programs on Africa 24.